warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, so our group will discuss about our case study, which is Cyprus Popular Bank, which is also known as LIKI. My name is Muhammad SYAFIQ bin RAMLI, and my matric number is 1180743. Okay, so my part, I will discuss about banking and finance terminology. There are so many terms of banking in the case study, and I have extract several which is obvious in the case study. Okay, so the first one is asset. Okay, so what is an asset? Asset is resources with economic value that is owned by an individual or a firm, which will provide future benefit. It is also increase firm's value and also benefit the firm's operation itself. Okay, so asset have several categories, which is the first one is current asset. So this current asset is a short-term resources which is used maybe within a year, for example like cash or inventory. Okay, so next is fixed asset. So it is the contra from the current asset. Fixed asset is something resources that can use in a long time, like a building, equipment, okay, and so on. So the next one is intangible asset. Okay, what is intangible asset? Intangible asset is resources with a no physical appearance, like trademark and copyrights. Okay, so last of the category of asset is financial asset. Okay, so financial asset is a type of investment which is in the asset, like stock or bond. Okay. That's about asset. Okay, so we proceed to the second one, which is liabilities. Okay, what is liabilities? Liabilities is something that's a person or a company owes, like money, usually money, but it can be money, goods, or maybe services. Okay, so the example of liabilities like loans, account payable, or mortgages. It has two types, which is current liabilities and long-term liabilities. Current liabilities is the opposite of long-term liabilities, which is short-term liabilities, which you have own something or other company or others with the time which is 12 months and below. It's just a short-term only. For example, like interest payable. Okay. The next one is long-term, the opposite of the short-term, which is you owe for a long time, 12 months and above, like that. So the example is like a warranty. Okay, so the next one is about deposit. Okay, so deposit is money that is held in the bank. And it's also a transaction involving a transfer of money to another for safekeeping. The depositors, the one who deposit money, the money is belong to the depositors, and also they can withdraw and transfer the money to others, because we just held the money in the bank for safekeeping. That's deposit. Okay, so deposit have two types, which is demand deposit and time deposit. Demand deposit is a saving account, the one that is used by an individual or a small business. It just you want to to have a saving or money in your account, and you can withdraw and whatsoever you want to do, transfer or others. Okay, so time deposit. Time deposit is a special one, which is a certificate of deposit, which the paid is fixed with fixed interest rate and with fixed time. The fourth one, which is about capital. Okay, so capital is a net worth of a bank and its equity value to investor. So this capital is something that you need to have to start a business. It's just like that. The easiest example of capital is cash. You have to have cash to start your business. Capital, it has asset capital. The asset capital is, for example, like cash and government securities. And then there is also has liability capital, which the example is like loan loss reserves or any debt. So we call it as a liability capital. Okay, so last one for my point is about commercial bank. Commercial bank is a financial institution that accept deposit. It's also offer account and also offer account service, also offer basic financial product. Basic financial product like saving account to individual or small business. So commercial bank make money by providing loans to their customer, which they will earn interest for the profit. It have two features: borrowing and lending. And then about this borrowing and lending, accepting deposit and lending money to project interest, which is the profit, which is the same that I said before. Okay, so I think that's all from my part. So thank you.
My name is AZRUL bin ZAHRIN, matrix number 1180755. I'm going to continue the terms being used in the case study, which is dividend. A dividend is the money that a company pays to its shareholders from its profit it has made. These payments can be made in cash or by the issuance of additional shares, as in the dividend script. However, dividend also can be defined as the amount payable to shareholders from profit or distribution reserves. Companies listed on the stock exchange are usually obligated to pay out dividends quarterly or semi-annually. The semi-annual or quarterly payout is called as interim dividend. The final payment typically made at the close of the company's financial year is known as final dividend. The next term is shares. Shares are the unit of ownership interest in the form of dividends in any corporation or financial asset which provide for an equal distribution in any profits, if any are declared. Common shares and preferred shares are two principal types of shares. Most companies issue common stock. Shareholders can benefit from the stock through appreciation and dividends, making common stock riskier than preferred stocks. Common stock also comes with voting rights, giving shareholders greater control over the company. In contrast, preferred stock does not typically offer value appreciation or voting rights in the corporation. The stock has typically set payment criteria, though a dividend that is paid out on a regular basis, making the stock less risky than common stock. Moreover, preferred stock will also be redeemed at a more favorable price than regular stock. After that is interest. Interest is measured as a percentage of credit or deposit balance paid periodically to the lender for the privilege of using their money. Usually the amount is quoted as an annual rate, but interest can be calculated for periods longer or shorter than a year. Interest is the cost of using somebody else's money. When you borrow their money, you need to pay the interest. When you lend money, you can earn the interest. There are two transactions that can make interest happen, which is when you are borrowing and lending. When borrowing, you will need to repay what you borrow. In addition, to compensate the lender for the risk of lending, you need to repay more than you borrowed. When you have extra money available, you can either lend it to others or deposit the funds into a savings account. You will get to gain interest in return. If you don't receive something, you may be tempted to spend the money instead. Next is securities. The term security is a fungible, negotiable financial instrument that holds some kind of monetary value. It represents a place of ownership in a publicly traded company, which is via stock, a creditor relationship with a government agency or a company, defined by owning the bond of the entity, or ownership rights as defined by an option. Securities can broadly categorize into distinct types, which is equities and debts. However, there are also hybrid securities that combine elements of both equities and debts. An equity security represents ownership interests held by shareholders in an entity such as company, partnership, or trust, provided in the form of capital stock shares that include both common and preferred stock shares. A debt security is money lent that must be repaid, with conditions defining the amount of the loan, the interest rate, and the maturity or renewal date. Debt securities, including government and corporate bonds, deposit certificates, and collateralized securities such as CDOs, and CMOs, typically entitle their holder to regular interest payments and principal repayments, regardless of the performance of the issuer. Hybrid securities, which is the combine of some of the characteristics of both debt and equity securities. Example of hybrid securities include equity warrants, which is the option issued by the company itself that gives shareholders the right to purchase stock within a certain time frame and in the specific price. The last one is loans. The terms loans in the case study, we highlighted it, which is the meaning in the Cambridge Dictionary. Loan is an amount of money that is borrowed, often from a bank, and has to be paid back, typically with an additional amount of money to be charged as a borrowing fee. The term loan refers to a form of credit instrument in which another party is being lent a sum of money in return for eventual repayment of the interest or principal amount. Loans come in many different forms, including secured, unsecured, commercial, and personal loans. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So my name is MUJAHID bin HARON 1180753 from KME 1. So for the case study assignment, I will present about the important notes of the case study. So the first important notes from the case study is about the timelines. So Laiki was the second largest bank just behind Bank of Cyprus. In 2012, the Laiki Bank had a total of euro 30 billion at September 2012. So that shows that it has a very large asset. It's not a problem, but it has been started from the beginning, which is Laiki Bank has been operated at Cyprus, which has a policy of low tax and low transparency. And later in March 2018, Laiki was dissolved, and its good parts were sold to Piraeus Bank, which is in Greece, and Bank of Cyprus. For the second part, which is pre-restructuring, so there is three categories, which is the shares, the hybrid capital and subordinated debt, and the senior bonds and deposits. So firstly, the shares. So the bank faced a loss of euro 0.7 billion in 2011. So that was as a result of the Greek government bonds and the goodwill write-downs on the Greek acquisition. So in order to compensate that, Laiki then solved the problem by decreasing its capital for existing shareholders, and they obtained euro 1.8 billion in recapitalization. The Cyprus government, they subscribed to shares, thus led to the first loss of the bank, and then losing some of the existing shareholders. And because of that, the government reduced the number of shares they received. And then the second one is the hybrid capital and subordinated debt. So euro 737 million hybrid capital was converted to shares, and the remaining of the shares was converted by the end of December. So Laiki Bank, they were offered by the liability management exercise, which is LME. In the LME, they tried to compensate the Laiki for the non-call of the bond at its first date, May 11, 2011. They were offered two choices, which is they were offered to swap the subordinated bond, which has a minus 27.5% haircut, into a senior bond carrying an 8% coupon with the same maturity, but they have a lower haircut percent, which is 17.4%. And then lastly is the senior bonds and deposits. So by March 2013, Laiki was already looking at a long history of loss in debt. Laiki Bank has lost 2/3 of its senior unsecured bonds by December 2010 only. They did not touch the senior bonds in June restructuring, and the largest senior bond left through ordinary redemption of 337 million euros. All of this led to the Laiki Bank being resolved in March 2013. So lastly is the third part, is the restructuring. There are 2 points in restructuring, which is shares, subordinated bonds, and hybrid capital, and the second one is the senior unsecured bonds and deposits. So firstly is the shares subordinated bonds and hybrid capital. So after the Laiki bank was resolved, restructuring happens as the balance sheet of the bank was split. So shares, hybrid capital and subordinated debt were allocated in March 2013, which is managed by the Central Bank of Cyprus. All three of these capital classes were split into unwinding vehicles. This led to the senior preference share classes for bond investors. And then for the second one, which is the senior unsecured bonds and deposits. So actually, the government of the Cyprus, they had a new government, and this new government had taken the steps to implement a few policies in 2018, and they take the example from the United States of America did in 1991 by adopting the least cost resolution approach with senior unsecured bonds, and large depositors were frequently bailed in. The Cyprus government actually implemented the bank restructuring and resolution law, a law which that followed a bit of the US but contradicts with the Europe.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad bin Hamidon and my metric number is 118073. So inshallah today I will presenting to you about the next part of our case study, which is critics and opinions. So the first problem with Cyprus Popular Bank, or we know it as Laikis Bank, is that it operates in a country that has low tax and low transparency policy in the financial sector. Operating at a low tax country has its pros and cons, but cons are more dangerous than the benefits of pros, as there is a lack of transparency such as negotiated tax rates, secret rulings, and other components of lack of transparency in dealing of transactions. It can also lead to illegal activities such money laundering and tax evasions, etc. Based on Deloitte's review on Laikis Bank on 2013, it can be concluded that the policies of money laundering rules were effectively absent, supported by the fact that the names of 90% of deposit account owners were anonymous and identified. In our opinion, the fact that Laiki failed to assert those policies accurately has been one of the ultimate factors that causes the downfall of these banks. As a certified bank, the management should be aware of this issue and take an initiative to make an improvement by improvising the existing rule to meet the standard criteria. The next point is the Greek government bonds haircut issue. By decreasing the capital of existing shareholders, Laiki managed to overcome this loss and gains about euro 1.8 billion through recapitalizations. However, Cyprus government certainly made a mistake by subscribing to shares, as there are some existing shareholders and they had to pay to Laiki 4 times the market price of shares in second quarter of 2012, which is 10 cents compared to 2.5 cents, which also led to reducing the number of shares they receive. Based on this case, we could not agree more with the Laiki strategies in managing their fund in order to overcome the GGB haircut issue as well as the goodwill issue. It is really important for banks authorities to make right decisions on what to do strategy for each unpredictable situation, solely focus on what will be the most beneficial for the bank itself. Let's move forward to the next point, which is government share capital investment. Laikis move to not prioritize at least junior bond creditor participations over early government share capital investment is something to be critical on. This issue has caused the unsuccessful restructuring plan of Laiki in 2013, which referred to the June 2012 government share capital investment, not to mention that even shareholders and hybrid capital owners receive a favorable deal from this case caused by the loss that was not being paid attention in 2012. This incident has greatly affected the Laiki management in various ways. From our point of view, As a management of bank, like his management should pay full attention towards the financial flow of the bank to ensure and prevent such cases from happen. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Abdul Hanan bin NORDIN, matric number 1180728. Okay, I will explain about the policy lesson in micro label. Okay, in this section, we will specify systematically some lesson for the most popular bank, which is likely on what should they do and not. Okay, first of all, they must prevent the illicit purpose and implement new rules. As the case study provide, there are many loopholes in the Lakis Bank and Cyprus had done. The latter, which is a world accounting organization, state that there are 90% unknown of deposited account owners and policy of money laundering rules was missing. So this problem have made the bank in dire situation. So the policy lesson that we can take in account is Cyprus should introduce a policy that can control its commercial bank. For example, likely should be more transparent in their depositors transaction. Any transaction should be recorded carefully and avoiding necessary mistake. Cyprus also need to be stricter in managing their roles and activity. Okay, for the second one, provide a good information and construct proper connection to the investor. As we know, all the big companies and business need a capital for their business. The biggest capital that we can get from an investor, which is shareholder. In this case, Cyprus and Lucky Bank need to present and prepare a good financial information and not misleading any data on their banking purpose. Besides, the bank should build a good relationship by doing the meeting with them regularly to show that the bank is taking good care of their money. We also can see in the case study that it is lacking data to make estimates of loss and not enough evidence whether likely shareholders had to suffer book value haircuts. Number 3, they should prioritize investors' participation, at least junior bond, over early government equity investment. From the case study, the restructuring in 2013 had failed due to the loss of government share capital investment in June 2012. The hybrid capital base of Euro 737 million in June 2012 was transferred into government parallel shares and concession exchange rates only. Okay, in this case, the government made a mistake because they decided to invest early in rank below most of the existing junior debt holders. They should give priority to the creditor participation, at least junior bond. They will make the junior investor protected by government from immediate burden sharing and economic case. Okay, number 4. Focus on good bank approach. Under the good bank approach, the state creates a new bank, which is the good bank, which gets the deposit and the of the all banks. The all banks get the compensation equal to the difference between the value of the clean assets it loses and the value of the deposit it gives up. In 2012, the explicit decision could have been taken earlier by posing the good bank concept and hence tie the fate of junior debt. Junior debts, unsecured bonds, and only a limited proportion of deposits directly to the performance of likely assets. Okay, for the fifth one, observe minimum standards in investor relations. There are many factors such as public discussion in taking action, the lack of moratoria to the benefit of insiders over non-insiders, and ad hoc change in the ranks, especially of public investor, resulting in declining government investor relations. This matter reflects the inadequacy of both the legal and institutional environment. As a result, this will make the restructuring process suffer from the lack of efficiency. In this case, the government should not deprive investors of upside where it appears possible after observing the loss waterfall. Okay, the sixth one is do not pay to restrict shareholders with cash. Okay, some companies will choose to pay their shareholders with dividends either in the form of cash payment, shares of stock, or other property. In the good case, providing options on new share sales to existing shareholders was a quid pro quo for investors, allowing potential book loss in advance, which can be seen as the more rational solution despite shortcomings. The seventh policy lesson is minimize the risk of distorted restructuring action. If the bank did not manage to avoid all distortion in restructuring action, they should reduce the risk to the minimum. In September 2012, A moratorium decision to prevent the senior bond status from maturing would have been taken before the due diligence effort that was agreed. In fact, the recapitalization decision of June 2009 should have been preceded by deeper careful research. Moreover, the failure to recognize loans by public lenders to Laiki, in particular the ECB, in March 2013, happened private loss both at Laiki and the Bank of Cyprus. Public and private stakeholders should be treated as equals in liability management approach. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So I will talk about macro policy of Cyprus Popular Bank. First, the meaning of macro policy. Macro policy is macroeconomics. Is a branch of economics that studies how an overall economy, the market systems that operate on a large scale. Macroeconomics studies economy-wide phenomenon such as inflation, price levels, rate of economic growth, national income, gross domestic product, and change in unemployment. On the macro level, the key drivers of participation of the creditor structure identified in the Cyprus Bank case are first, the delay between first risk realization and comprehensive restructuring. Second, the depth of participation imposed on the capital structure both before and during the restructuring. Next is macroeconomic development. For more in-depth discussion, initially in 2007, Laiki Bank showed relatively rapid economic growth in the range of 5%. As a result, public income increased and resulted in a surplus in public finances. The main reason for its growth is based on construction and financial services. Initially, the world financial crisis in 2008 was at a moderate level, but later it began to decline due to the bubble boom in the construction sector. This has led to an imbalance in the hidden key structure that affected subsequent years to an unsustainable bubble. The clearest indication of the imbalance in the real estate sector is the very high growth in 2005 in construction and financial services of 6% and 10% per annum on average in 2005 and 2008 respectively. This development was driven by the possible access lending as sufficient liquidity conditions occurred in the banking system at that time, coupled with a reduction in liquidity ratio from 70% to 20% on non-resident euro deposits. The increase in liquidity resulting from the reduction in liquidity ratio is given to unproductive investments. As a result, in 2008, the current account deficit reached a peak of 15.5% of GDP, which show a very high level of corporate debt and households at a low level. The environmental downturn after 2008 was followed by a devastating economic bubble. The economy unavoidably followed a downward spiral reflected in diminishing growth, rapidly rising unemployment, high structural deficits, and sharply rising public debt, which was further charged by capital injection to recapitalize Laiki Bank in June 12. So that's all. Thank you for listening.